Good morning, everyone. We're going to wait just a few minutes as we wait for everybody to get into from the waiting room into the webinar. Good morning, everybody. For those who are just joining us, we're going to wait just another minute to make sure that everybody who wants to be here will be able to see the full talk. And you can feel free to use the chat during the meeting to say hello to those who you know. Let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to see how far these talks are continuing to reach people across the globe. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Icon Book and Paper Group, welcome to the 40th webinar of the Conservation Together at Home series. Our talk today, Divine Conservation, is from staff at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Libraries in Cambridge, Massachusetts, USA. I'll briefly introduce our speakers. Emilie Hardman is the head of the Department of Distinctive Collections at MIT Libraries. Jana Dambrogio is the Thomas F. Peterson, 1957, conservator at the MIT Libraries, and works in the Wunsch Lab with conservation and AI assistant Nicole Araya, conservation assistant Laura Bergemann, conservation associate Ayako Letizia, and preservation assistant Jennifer Pellecchia. They are joined by Monicka, Clio, Sakki, a visual artist and tarot deck designer. Our panelists have kindly given their permission for this talk to be recorded, and it will be available online as soon as possible following the live event. As a reminder, we are all working from our home internet, so please bear with us in case of any difficulties. Should we need to end and restart the webinar for any reason, you can use the same link to rejoin the meeting. And if you have any questions during the webinar, you can please submit them through the Q&A function visible in the toolbar of your meeting window at any time. We will answer these at the end of the talk. Finally, if you would like to tweet or post along with the webinar, we'd ask that you use the hashtag #ConservationTogetherAtHome. And I will turn it over to the MIT Library staff.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Pellecchia. I work as a preservation assistant at the MIT Libraries. We want to acknowledge, though, our presentation today is happening virtually and internationally, that the land where our lab and our campus are located is the traditional unceded territory of the Wampanoag Nation. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal of Indigenous peoples from this territory, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous people connected to this land. Prior to 2002, MIT Libraries solely performed preservation work, which included repairs, shelf preparation, and commercial bindings. The preservation program was housed in a variety of locations, including the MIT mailroom and the library's cataloging area. In 2002, with the generous support of E. Martin and Ethel Wunsch, as well as an anonymous donor, the MIT Libraries were able to renovate and expand preservation space in the basement of Hayden Library to create the E. Martin 1944 and Ethel Wunsch Conservation Laboratory. The space increased in size and provided equipment for the conservation of the Institute's rarest books, manuscript collections, and archival records. In 2019, Conservation joined the newly formed Department of Distinctive Collections, which collects, preserves, and fosters the use of unique and rare materials, such as tangible and digital archives, manuscripts, ephemera, artist books, and more. Conservation and preservation staff remain separate entities until September of 2019, when the preservation staff joined the conservation team. Forming this team has allowed us to develop a shared understanding of the library's physical collections as a whole. An early collection priority of the Department of Distinctive Collections has been contemporary, artist-made, and independently produced tarot decks, with a particular interest in radical, feminist, queer, POC, and spiritually and religiously diverse revisions to the traditional tarot narratives and archetypes. The tarot is a deck of cards, usually 78 in number, that can be used for gameplay, divination, meditation, and storytelling. It's been popular since the mid-15th century, and today it has a vital and varied life as a medium for artistic expression. And now to tell us more about the rationale behind the collection is Emilie Hardman, who is our head of Distinctive Collections.
Hi everyone, I know you're here to hear about conservation, and I'm kind of an interloper in this conversation, but I really appreciate the invitation from my colleagues to join you for a few moments and talk about the background of the collection, why we built it, how we built it, and what's important about it, at least as I see it as its curator. There are lots of books, articles, wide swaths of the internet that will tell you about tarot history, lore, and how-tos, and you can check those out later if you aren't already familiar. But what I'll offer now is my definition of contemporary tarot as a thing that is, for all intents and purposes, a modular, purposefully unbound text whose narrative is primarily advanced through images and whose narrative structures are durable even when the disruption of original ordering occurs. So each tarot deck is sort of sequentially ordered when it comes in the door. We are meant to break that order. And we are meant to assemble new meanings, new understandings, new insights through tarot readings when cards are randomly drawn from the deck and arranged. This kind of definition might really reveal itself to be derived from the mind of a librarian. More conventional definitions probably call tarot something like, depending on the perspective, a tool for divination or self-reflection or a game. And it is all of those things. But framing tarot as a text offers us the opportunity for understanding and engagement that transcends its uses in a personal practice, and particularly offers it as an object for serious scholarly study and scrutiny. So there's a big resurgence of interest in tarot in America, which hasn't been seen on this order since the 1960s. And that really broadly set the stage for the collection we were building, but this effort wasn't simply concerned with documenting the cultural production of the moment. Working within the context, as we do, of a digital-first library system, as someone who deeply believes in the power of physical engagement with collections, I really wanted specifically to build or acquire a collection that could equally invite highly unique opportunities for users to engage the same material in both digital and tangible modes. Similarly, our institutional context is as a social justice framed library system, and this provided a perfect platform to address issues of diversity and representation, as well as those of access and accountability in the development of the collection. And this isn't an effort that's concerned with like box checking, or it's not an abstraction. It really was at its core an attempt to demonstrate how and why it matters that we collect and make collections available with these values in mind. And over the course of the last year, we've assembled this collection of approximately 500 independently produced tarot decks, experimenting with them in classrooms, community teaching and learning events, and also developing and supporting digital prototyping with the aim of exploring all these commitments. In serious scholarship, I believe there is importance to the sense of creative openness and play, and that these things perform a vital service to our work. The Indie Tarot collection was conceived of as precisely the kind of collection that could engage people in all of these possibilities at once, and also critically, given our need to build up staffing and revamp and modernize some service layers and technology platforms, it was a place we could start to model and cultivate the kind of creative engagements that we wanted to have without a lot of resourcing. Of course, that meant that a lot of our teams had to get really creative and build new things, which you'll see more on show in this talk today. So about collection building, we are buying new materials, but with a special collections perspective on the collection in terms of the involvement of conservation, in terms of access, and also in terms of a sense of historical importance. In January 2019, I began a focused search to identify all the independently produced tarot decks from the last 5 years that I could. Using a variety of platforms, I identified initially more than 550 decks. And as I was working on this assemblage, more decks were created almost every day. And yet of that initial group, about 26% were already out of print or unavailable. The decks are highly ephemeral, and while some searches have been able to fill in things on the used market, generally the gap remains. A lot of these decks are produced with crowdfunding through sites like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and they are managed through print-on-demand platforms. So creators are often working with big services in China. They arrange for a certain number of decks to be printed according to a fee schedule, and what's printed is what's printed, and when it's gone, it's gone. So we're really swooping in to kind of capture them at their moment of production. We're capturing the deck as well as all of these really unique physical properties and attendant objects. These decks are pretty immediately magnetic, and the draw to the unique features of the deck. What does this one feel like? What's it made of? How does it shine or reflect? How does it feel in my hands to shuffle it, to hold it, to put them out on the table? All of that is a magnetic draw immediately. And we really wanted to highlight the importance of that physical engagement with the objects and the building up of understanding, investigative, scholarly, and creative skill through tangible engagement. We keep all sorts of things that come with these decks to help highlight the range of cultural activity that happens along with them. That means that we have crystals as well as jelly beans, which form a crystal-like function in a pinch. And altars, cloths, other items also that come as incentives through our crowdfunding support. So we act really as a public citizen to support the creation of some of these decks. An argument for collecting contemporary tarot and an effort to document the many and varied decks that have been produced over the years could be made simply on the grounds of its underrepresentation in libraries. So the canonical Smith-Waite deck, for example, which was published in 1910, is thought to have sold more than 100 million copies in 20 countries over the course of its existence. This makes it even more popular than Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and yet it is hardly a blip in library collections. If you look in WorldCat, there are just a handful of listings, and some of them even offer an apology when you get into the record saying, sorry, no libraries with that specific item have been found. It's of course not that these haven't been collected by libraries or museums, but they've tended to be focused on them as luxury productions or rare specimens, sometimes games in the context of public libraries. Our collection is really unique as one that's been assembled with scale in mind, sampling broadly from currently commercially available decks on the market, with a specific goal of building up a study collection in order to document the diversity of artistic interpretations and the archetypes. Essentially, we've collected 500 of the same versions of the text, and yet, as you can see, they're radically different from one another. It's plainly observable. And the diversity of that content is a deeper draw into the conversations about the material and ways of working with it. So what you're seeing here is the same card repeated in columns, and you can see very immediately that these different interpretations bring potential for new insight when you engage with the image. If we look at the next slide, so these are actually representations all of exactly the same card. And you can see the way that they're grouped sort of along the lines of commonalities. So we might have a lion in a lot of the cards, but that way the lion is interacted with could be radically different. And then we get into sort of really radically different kinds of interpretations, tigers, beetles, self-care as an act of strength. Yeah. So in a discussion of historical treatment of tarot, scholar Robert Place writes about the ways that occultists built up all these series of elaborate correspondences associating numbers, letters of Hebrew alphabets, esoteric symbols with tarot cards, and established canonical meanings for each card. And he laments that. He says, it becomes like just about a memorized meaning. Within our collection, the primacy of art and imagery is clear, and each artist has a different way of approaching the card and manifesting their understanding of the stories, their sense of the meaning and the message. And in this way, fixity is disrupted. The central narrative structures are evident deck to deck, but deployment of a canonical interpretation is immediately a challenge because the images are so different and reflect their own truths and meanings, posing considerations and new opportunities for understanding. Our collection really privileges the decks that engage with issues of representation and challenge dominant language, providing alternatives to these traditional formulations, which you can see sort of outlined here in a deck or slide that's a little bit jumbled, but I think you can see the point. On the far left is Patricia Pamela Coleman Smith's original Hierophant, and then we have Courtney Alexander's with the young Black girl placing her hand out to the camera, to our camera. So these cards, the variations, it's certainly important as an in-person experience to touch them, to experience them, to really engage with these images. But we also wanted to go with a digital approach to help do this work, again, at scale and provide really nuanced ways in. So Nicole's going to talk more about that process.
Thank you, Emily. Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm a conservation assistant at Wunsch Lab, and I'm going to give a quick tarot primer for those who are a little less familiar with the practice. As Jen mentioned, a typical tarot deck contains 78 cards, 22 in the major arcana and 56 in the minor arcana. The 22 major arcana cards represent a cycle of archetypal cards, beginning with the Fool and ending with the World. The minor arcana is further subdivided into 4 suits of 12 cards each, like a normal playing card deck. And these 4 suits often fall into the categories of wands, cups, swords, and pentacles, or suits that represent those 4 different energies in life. However, what's interesting and unique about indie tarot decks is that they often depart from this conventional format, with some suits not mapping onto the traditional 4, or with some decks adding additional cards onto the traditional 78. So we were presented with the challenge of capturing the structure of a tarot deck and the divergence from it in a metadata schema. So we ended up creating a format that contained the deck identifier, a suit identifier, and card number information in a single number. So non-traditional suits and additional cards are referenced by the suits 6 to 10, whereas the normal wands, cups, swords, and pentacles are referenced by suit IDs 2 to 5. This allows us to pull specific cards or reference particular suits across the corpus of the collection. So in the next slide, we can see these are the identifiers for the Fool card, the first card of the entire major arcana from 3 different decks. So these all have the same second and third number because they're card 0 of the major arcana. And then the first number is just the deck identifiers. In the next page, so using this metadata schema and scan images of the cards, we were able to incorporate AI computer vision programs to gather additional data about the cards on a large scale. So we used several different AIs to gather tags, colors, and object recognition, and create an additional tool for users to be able to browse the collection and understand it through different lenses. These tests actually ended up exposing biases written into the program, such as identifying all figures with a hat as a gentleman. The image below shows the tags generated by this Ace of Cups card. So you can see all of the results that just with an untrained AI came up when we ran this card through like several different computer vision programs. And so these tags are what we would input into a system that would allow us to take any of these tags and see all of the cards that generated the same tag. In the next page. So this website prototype shows how the data gathered can be used to look at the collection through a different lens and see connections across cards and decks. So here, these two cards are what are the result of the religion tag and the color red. And this prototype only uses like 4 decks, but it was sort of a proof of concept to see how AI can really be used to give users like another way into the collection and understanding how to see connections across the cards and decks. Now, as we began digitizing the cards, we realized that we'd been leaving our fingerprints on them, as tarot is a very like tangible practice, and you shuffle it, you touch the cards, and there's this practice of putting your own energy into the physical objects. However, these our fingerprints were showing up in the scan images. So we had to adapt our workflow to ensure everyone used gloves while handling the cards. And next, Jana Dambrogio will talk about additional adaptations and innovation that conservation made while learning how to care for these decks.
Thank you. I'm Jana Dambrogio, and I work as the Thomas F. Peterson Conservator here at MIT. Our conservation team oversees the care of our distinctive collections, which includes tarot decks, stained glass windows, locked letters, student creations, about 30,000 rare books, and millions of tangible and digital archival assets. We manage the collection spaces located in 10 buildings on campus. In addition to the traditional uses, the Wunsch Conservation Lab functions as a unique and versatile space on campus, a place where students and faculty can access our cataloged study collections and our expertise to make papyrus sheets, bind books, print, create. Or our lab functions as a place for our staff to host seminars. When you come into our space, you will most definitely be invited to make or do something with us. We are committing to a high conservation process of thoughtful engagement around treating tarot decks with the same respect as all other collection items. Our practices directly connect to our mission and value statements with regard to conserving the integrity of cultural heritage. Our storage container policy influences include the work of Peter, Michael, and Carmen Waters, Haiti Kyle's origami engineered enclosures, and Conservation by Design solid wall board offerings. Our intention for the work and research we do tie into an underlying theme found in MIT's motto, to learn by doing, with kindness, equity, and inclusivity, and to inspire and to engage others to do the same. The Indie Tarot Deck Project delights us as it connects to all tenets of our work philosophy. And thanks to Emilie, who formalized the integration of conservation practice across our department, the library system, and the Institute. Some of our work from this integration includes writing out our philosophy and standardizing all conservation grade supplies. Limiting the types and styles of supplies, these self-imposed boundaries, has helped us to reimagine the use of the interior spaces of these storage containers. Having a controlled list of supplies reduces our admin time spent on ordering, which frees up our time for other responsibilities. We've been intrigued with Emilie's collecting initiative from the start. As we began to process the collection, it was easy to see how tarot decks are in fact unbound artist books. And having the AI work take place in the lab has helped us to understand that AI functions as a sort of Rosetta Stone for the different decks. Importantly, our decks are a study collection and will preserve the evidence of their use and not view that use as damage that needs repaired or cleaned. We'll find a way to retain the decks with their accessories and work with Emilie, seen here, to develop ways to help others learn how to handle the decks, especially during the ever necessary task of shuffling. Last summer, the team spent time discussing with Emilie how we would use the cards to teach and how Nicole would need to handle the cards to begin her AI work. And knowing how they needed to work with the collections affected our approach to conserving it. Tarot also required us to devise a low-tech courier procedure to transport collections securely around campus. Envelopes, the temporary containers used to unpack and keep separate the newly arrived decks with their accessories, inspired our pocket solution that Ayako will now discuss.
Thank you, Jana. My name is Ayako Letizia. I'm Conservation Associate at the Wunsch Lab. I'm going to talk about our challenge to create housing for tarot deck collection. The challenge includes two things. First, how can we create the housing to make efficient use of interior space of standardized document boxes? The standardized document boxes that we use for the tarot deck collection is the US legal size with 5 inches in width. This box can store 10 to 12 decks. In our conservation practice, our goal of item storage is to use standardized boxes as much as possible. We can use such boxes to house 90% of our archival collections. Second, we want to apply our practice of non-adhesive enclosure making for exteriors to the interior container constructions. What type of individual housing were appropriate for the tarot decks? The tarot decks have particular needs, and many tarot decks come with accessories. They're so unique, such as companion books, thank you notes from artists, stickers, cards, stones, charms, badges, and jelly beans. Accessories can be lost or discarded over time, similar to ephemera, especially when they don't have appropriate housings. They need to be housed together with its deck. So we decided to design and build the interior containers that we named Document Box Pocket. The Document Box Pocket has the following attributes. We wanted to construct the pocket without the use of any adhesives, because most adhesives might deteriorate over time, or they might discharge when affected in high humidity or water disaster and harm the original items. We are practicing minimal use of adhesive to avoid such risk. The pocket is made of conservation-grade 20-point paper-based board. The pocket should be made of paper-based or organic sustainable materials. Such materials is recyclable and biodegradable when the pockets needs to be discarded or replaced. Giving the pockets to each tarot deck helps users easily access and safely handle the collection. The open bin style makes it easier to visually spot the tarot deck desired compared to the closed housings. Also, the tarot pocket walls are sturdy enough to allow users to put pockets in and out safely of the standardized document boxes. To be economical on the budget and the labor cost, the design needs to be simple so that the pocket can be constructed in a short period. The design also needs to be made in the way that full sheet of board cuts efficiently. After we made the first prototype, it was estimated that if making it by hand, it would take 170 hours, almost a consecutive whole month, working 7 hours a day to make all 500 pockets. So we decided to outsource to create the pockets. The HF Group is the company specialized in the library bindings and enclosures. They also make beautiful customized boxes that we often order. In discussion with Kat Thomas, a conservator in the HF Group, we together improved the pocket structure. These images show the design development of the pocket. It started from left to right. That is the final design. For ordering, we measured the width of the sample set of 70 decks from the collection to help us determine pocket width. We ordered 5 different widths from 3 to 5 centimeters for every 0.5 centimeter. In this picture, we are assembling a pocket that are shipped flat. Tarot decks are neatly placed in the pockets and then housed in the standardized document box. Any flat accessories are placed in the polyester L sleeve within the pocket. The polyester sleeve protects accessories that have any adhesive on, such as self-adhesive stickers or pressure-sensitive tapes. The pocket also can be used to store small items other than the tarot decks, such as curled photographs, cards, or small sub-collections. The pockets can free up valuable shelf space in the storage area. At the beginning of the housing project, we called the structure as a tarot deck pocket, but soon after we saw its adaptability for multi-purpose use, we changed the name to document box pocket.
Thank you, Ayako. One of the best things about this project was getting to see the huge range of tarot decks and the choices that the creators made artistically, but also in the ways that their decks were produced. Monicka Clio Sakki is a creative director and a visual artist whose tarot deck and its accompanying enclosure made a huge impression on the Wunsch staff. Monicka, thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us why you decided to use tarot as your medium?
Hello, I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, well, how I chose tarot. The thing is, I never really chose tarot. Tarot chose me. I used to work in New York City in Golden Books, which is one of the world's biggest publisher for children's books. And I was working there as a designer with licensed properties, animated properties like Disney, Barbie, Scooby-Doo was one of the properties I mainly worked for. And I was really inspired, you know, by this work and how it was created and how it was, they were allowing other designers to be able to produce products with their license. So I decided to create my own brand that is, you know, like these brands. And I started doing my own illustration style. I developed something that was unique for me, but I didn't have a story to illustrate. Like I didn't have a book. I didn't see myself as a writer, someone that's, you know, going to write a story and illustrate it. So the idea of tarot, it was just a solution for me. You know, I've been into the tarot already for a few years, so I thought, great, it has characters, it has, you know, symbols and a meaning, and there are no words. So that's the reason why I started. And the first card, can you please show? Yeah, that was the first card, the Magician, because I thought, okay, you know, let's make some magic. And I started creating, I made 20 cards. And after I made 20 cards, it was like, okay, I'm doing a tarot deck. Like, you know, I wasn't aware that I'm doing a tarot deck till that happened. So that's how I got into that.
And how did your background as a book designer kind of influence your overall process?
Okay, so the truth is what I learned, I'm a graphic designer, you know, by education, but when I started working in Golden Books, I was exposed to this huge world of style guides. That was new to me. And that's where I learned how to design a style guide and how to, mainly to use it, because I was using style guides of other properties. So I started first of all sketching everything on pocket-sized notebooks with the pilot pen. And then I was taking all those images, scanning them and turning them into vectors. And that's how I created, you know, my Sakki library, which is made out of 3 parts. One part is vector art of characters, everyday items, you know, faces, all the scribbles that I've been doing in meetings. I've been doing a lot of scribbling in meetings. So that's one part. Another part is what I call, can you please see the other? Yeah, so these are like, I was separating characters. I was drawing separately the heads and separately the bodies, so that I can, you know, do this mix and match, you know, like those games when we're playing when we're little, to do the mix and match. Yeah, and then I was also trying different colors, you know, for every character. I had like different color combinations. And there was also, I would make, yeah, here all these like tea time items and trees and symbols and shoes. I had a lot of shoes made. But another kind of drawings that I would make is, yeah, what I call the Clio forms, which are all abstract shapes. These are really doodles, you know, like doodling. And I was turning those into hats and dresses and houses and mountains and grass and gifts and you name it. So that was really another way to really, you know, I was first creating something, and then I would see what I'm going to make out of it. Like the creative process here was fascinating. And the other part of my, of the visual library of the Sakki, yeah, these are also Clio forms. Can I have the other slide? Yeah. So the last part of the Sakki library is what I call the sensitive inks. I knew I wanted a style that is a little different, that it's not just vector art, because vector art was already starting to be, you know, very popular and everybody was doing vector art. I wanted something that was harder to imitate, had more of my signature feel and look in it. So I started creating those sensitive inks, which basically I would take brushes. Can we show the next? Yeah. I would take brushes and a few pieces of thick watercolor paper. That's the little, the things that look like teeth on top. I would dip them into ink, and then I would stamp the paper. You can see that in the next slide. I would stamp the paper, and that's how I would create patterns. And I had a little Ziploc bag with these, and I would go places and I would just I would sit somewhere and I would open my sensitive inks studio, right? I would create. So, you know, that has been the process of creating my style guide. And I wouldn't, if I wasn't working in Golden, if I wouldn't see also the organization, you know, I have folders and everything goes into folders and has a certain naming and a certain way to be used. Yeah, this is like a color chart. Everything is following specific colors, you know, like one card is called, like my deck is very colorful, but every card has its own color palette. Okay, so these are stuff that, yeah, from the publishing world I learned, and it has been amazing. So, yeah.
So the flat box that you shipped with your deck became so influential to the Wunsch staff. What made you decide to create a flat enclosure and do it that way?
Okay, well, I didn't do the made in China thing. Also, that was, you know, quite a few years ago, that the China thing was not as easy for an indie artist to approach even. So I needed to do something that was smart, that was different, that was functional, and that budget-wise it could still work. Like, you know, it wasn't like very, you know, like the made in China, they have a lot of labor-intensive boxes. I needed something that would be simpler. And I worked with a box company and we created it together. They helped me come up with the design, and the minute we it was like, this is it. So yeah, it was really a necessity. It was not my dream box, you know.
Well, it turned out to be our dream box, so thank you.
I'm so glad that happened. I'm so glad that happened.
We are too. So I know you're a tarot practitioner. I'm a tarot practitioner. There are a lot of ideas about the ways that tarot decks should be stored and whether they should be cleansed. And a lot of what we're doing at MIT is sort of just in direct opposition to the advice that you get about how to take care of your deck in the kind of spiritual sense. How do you feel about having seen the way that we store the decks? Do you have any feelings about that?
Okay, I'm going to tell you, first of all, my personal approach to this. I'm quite liberated from all the rules with storing and cleaning. I do many times spreads on my keyboard, you know, just what works, you know, that's, you know, I don't have to sage everything before or after. That's my approach. But I think if you're asking me if your process is sacred enough, okay, I'm going to tell you that collecting, storing, and taking care of the decks this way, I think it's the highest level of sacred treatment, really. I'm saying this and I have goosebumps. This whole presentation that you put here, all this work you're doing, it's, look, you know, I'm really having goosebumps to say that. It's just incredible, you know, this is it. This is sacred. This is sacred treatment. This is taking in and looking at culture and make it count.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my honor.
Monica's work is absolutely beautiful, so please visit her websites. I know she has some webinars coming up to talk more about tarot and her process. And the box that I mentioned is something that Laura is now going to speak to.
Hello. My name is Laura Bergemann, and I am a conservation assistant at the Wunsch Conservation Lab at MIT Libraries. As you've been hearing, for our conservation staff, this new tarot collection is not just a physical collection that is in need of conservation care and housing, but it also serves as daily inspiration for us, especially with regards to custom housings, as you can see our Sakki dream box on the previous slide. And as we've mentioned, sorry, Jen, can you go back? Oh. I think we are having just a little bit of technical difficulty. Yeah. So our Sakki dream box is here. And as we've mentioned, we're always looking for inspiration to create and improve our sustainable housing for our collections. And we prefer our non-adhesive solid board and modular designs. And in our lab, we have these two boxes, an Elaine Ducasse chocolate box and a takeout salad container, which are hanging up to serve as potential inspiration for us. And as Jen mentioned, inspiration struck again when we were housing tarot, as we came across one of Monica's Sakki tarot decks. The box for this deck, which you can see in this photograph, arrived flat, and it's made out of paper with no adhesive. And this really inspired us to create one of our newest collection housings. In these diagrams, you can see on the left, the Sakki format, which has the attached lid, and then it has reinforced doubled walls on most of the sides and at the bottom. And on the right, we modified this design to create a high-walled tray, or 1/2 of a telescoping box. And this modified design allows for triple reinforcement on the bottom and double reinforcement on all of the sides. And this reinforcement allows the box to stay folded. So in this video, you're going to see the Wunsch modified box design deconstructed and reconstructed. This is only the top of the box, but you will see the bottom of the box come into view at the end of the video. This particular box is scaled to fit an artifact, specifically a ceramic bowl. And although we usually order custom boxes for artifacts, these pieces needed a custom housing in a very short time. And these boxes were made in approximately 1 hour. So both the top and bottom piece fold in exactly the same way. The top box is slightly larger. And this design is very economical, as each piece of the box is only made from a single sheet of paper. And it's completely safe, as there are very few interior seams, and the lift-off lid allows for easy access to any artifact in the box. And we believe that this is not only an economical option in general, but especially for oversized item boxes, as the box material can ship flat, cutting down on shipping costs. And the design also allows for cushioning or stiffening inserts to be inserted between the doubled walls. So now you see the top of the box refolded and the bottom of the box is here, and they fit together like so. Now, if we go to the next slide, we can see the box padded out for extra protection, which can be done if necessary. This is all modular padding. It's simply Volara wrapped in Permador paper. And there's also padding inside of the walls of the box. But none of these pads use any adhesive, so they can be removed and replaced if necessary. And on the right, you can see that it's the same box design, simply scaled to fit a different size of artifact. Again, each of those pieces made out of a single piece of paper. And finally, we also utilized this inspirational Sakki design to create an artifact tray. One other deck in our tarot collection is the miniature tarot, which you can see in the top right. These cards are only 2 centimeters in height, and there are 78 of them. And we, again, want this collection to be open for access for every deck in the collection. But for this deck, we wanted to make sure that none of the small cards could get lost in storage or in use. So we created a small 4-flap, which they fit nicely into in their small container bag. But we also used this box design to create a small play tray, as you can see in the center, so that when a patron takes out this deck, they have a ready-made surface that is safely there for them to use the deck. And all of these items nest safely inside one another, inside of our document box pocket. And now Jen is going to talk about how these tarot decks inspired Wunsch staff in yet another way.
Thank you, Laura. So you've seen how we've been inspired on a practical level by our tarot designers, but we've also, in looking at the decks, been brainstorming ideas for designing our own deck. The meanings of each card and the accompanying visuals will be based on our experiences working in conservation and preservation, and informed by some of the tools and techniques we have encountered while we've trained as conservators and as handbook binders. Our goal is a collaborative deck, which would represent the many aspects of the book arts and of conservation. So we will be issuing a call for artists to join us in that in the near future. So to summarize, it took us 10 months to process 500 indie tarot decks, which could be as many as 39,000 tarot cards. They're in 450 pockets, which fit into 47 standard document boxes. 3 policies and workflow documents had to be created to accomplish all of this, and our experimentation led to the 3 different housing designs you see here, and the 3 videos showing our custom housing assembly are available on our YouTube channel. You'll find a link to that on the final slide of the presentation. The document box pockets that are shown here on the cards were left over from our tarot project, and they became an important part of our COVID-19 prep kits. They allowed us to go into our storage spaces and quickly consolidate groups of cassette tapes, curled photographs, and other small collections items efficiently into the standard document boxes. Reducing the number of boxes that we were using to store smaller items freed up shelving for a large number of oversized collections so that they could be stored securely and flat in anticipation of our long absence from campus. The pockets will ensure that collections stay ready for catalog processing and image capture when library staff are able to return to campus. They're just one example of the ways conservation and preservation professionals must always be prepared to adapt to changing circumstances. And since that brings us to the present, we can open it up to questions.
Thank you so much. Let me be the first to thank you all again for your wonderful presentation, and also to express my appreciation for all of the innovative products that you have created as a result of your work with these tarot decks. This is absolutely fascinating. So we have a few questions in the Q&A, and I'll encourage any of our viewers who haven't yet submitted a question to please do so if you would like to ask the MIT Library staff anything in particular. So we have a couple of questions here that we'll start with. So this first one is from Claire McQuillan. And she has a question about the frequency of rehousing. She says, how often do you expect to have to rehouse the decks in future? I'm interested that you are looking for biodegradable materials. How long do you expect them to last before starting to deteriorate?
Thank you. We we hope that the papers, that the box materials that we do buy that are conservation grade, acid-free supplies will outlive us and our predecessors.
Awesome. Now we have several questions about your pockets. These designs, especially people are looking to know whether it would be possible for you to share them so that other institutions might be able to utilize them.
Absolutely. The design is through the HF group. So Kat Thomas has that design, and we can certainly share, we can photocopy it and send you the layout to get our dimensions. Absolutely.
Excellent. And so the contact information for the library staff is all here on these slides, so you should be able to get a hold of them to arrange that should you desire it. And I have a follow-up question to that. For your custom boxes that are made in-house, do you do all of the cutting, et cetera, by hand, or do you have an automated box maker, like a case make or something along those lines?
That's a great question. All of our work is done by hand.
Which
so
is fantastic.
Right. And we really want to challenge ourselves to kind of stay away from as many adhesives. So we really are inspired by any origami type engineering that we really did see in the preservation push in the archival world to kind of make pizza boxes for rare books instead of custom made rare book boxes with adhesives and trays and like cloth coverings.
Excellent. Let's see, I have another question here from Mary Broadway. This is about whether you'd be willing to share the templates for the handmade boxes, and it sounds like yes, along with the box pockets, there's opportunity for access to that as well through contact with you guys.
Absolutely, and we hope to place a lot of part of the initiative of MIT is to have information freely accessible. So from our icons to working with distinctive collections to any kind of how-to videos, you can find them on our DDC at MIT playlist for watching us make things like cradles or treatment repairs. And then on our website, we should be able soon to have PDF accessible resources for you. But until then, for the PDF accessibility, we can provide information through emails.
Wonderful. All right, we have a question here. Are you concerned with the off-gassing of any of the deck materials, especially the plastics? And then any concern about the potential for insect attraction, such as the jelly beans that you mentioned?
Sure, we are developing a workflow with our processing teams to call to our attention, like an if-then kind of workflow. If you see a jelly bean in the collection, then bring it to conservation so that we can encapsulate. And then monitoring, environmental monitoring, or just being very an advocate every time you walk through the collections, looking for details, using all your senses to detect, oh, something is smelly. It's just by observation. So having a conservator be constantly present and in our spaces, in our storage spaces, and kind of encouraging our colleagues who are in those spaces to be monitoring constantly as a daily practice is one way to kind of address that question, to pay attention to things or smells or drips or frass, and then call attention to it. So that's how that'd be our best, most economical approach to monitoring those types of situations.
There's a question a little later in the chat about like really what is a jelly bean that you keep referencing, and we do in fact mean candy. And when we first saw candy kind of come in along with the decks, I was really afraid that Jana and I were gonna like have to go into some locked battle over it because I really wanted to keep the candy, and I knew that it would be a conservation concern. But we came to a kind of quick compromise, and those materials are encapsulated to protect them. But the saving of them really is important because they are offered in this spirit of of kind of play and substitution and just creative necessity, which I think is something Monicka highlighted as well. And we want to preserve not just the decks as the decks, but all of the process pieces and the decisions behind it too. So saving the jelly beans, saving the candies to function as part of the deck experience later was really important. And I'm grateful that they, conservation allowed that to happen.
Yeah, we embrace preserving process. So we do have, especially artistic process. And so we see that in our other collections. We've come across seeds, packets of seeds that were inspired by Pina's process somehow. We don't know how, but we want to preserve that because it's in his papers. And so we're open to it, and we look for our tools that can help us protect organic materials from our pests that like to come and visit our collections.
Great. And that answered another one of the questions in the Q&A about process documents, wondering if that was collected. It sounds like, yes, that is the case. So that's awesome. Let's see. I have a lot of questions. This is wonderful. A couple of questions about, again, materials. It was mentioned in the presentation that the lab prefers solid board housings. Do you have any concerns about using corrugated board, which is frequently utilized in housings, or could you speak a little bit more to that?
Sure. We like the lightweightness of corrugation, but for two reasons we don't use corrugation is one, it has this place where little pests can go and live. It's dark, it can attract bug. I mean, it's a perfect environment if it attracts bugs. I don't know that it does or not, or pests rather. And we learned from Hugh Phibbs when he came to campus in November for his adaptive preservation talk that the fluting can act as a way to pull air if there was ever the event of a fire, that it is this perfect tool to pull fire through collections. And that's not to say, there are pros and cons to every material, and we have lots of corrugation in our housings, but we've just kind of have veered away from that for those two reasons. The solid board also seems to, if we do have water events, bead off and over the support, the protective enclosures. So it's a preference for us to go that way towards the solid wall. But we are constantly adaptive and paying attention. And if there's ever any kind of research that pulls us back in a different direction or in a new direction, we are going to be open to it, and we're going to be looking for it to protect the collections in the best way that we can and to do no harm.
Awesome. Thank you. Another materials question, were any of the decks specifically the cards, made of non-paper materials that required some special considerations for storage?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, were any of the decks made of non-paper materials that required special housing or storage considerations?
Not yet. Not that I can remember. Anyone else?
Well, there are a number of things that are made with different materials. So we do have decks that are printed on plastics or that are holographic, materials that are very, very much handmade. So like apparently laminated at someone's kitchen table, so we have concerns about how those things will hold up as they're used. Some of the materials are very thin or printed on paper from like letterpress and not laminated. Other laminations are curling. So there's a variety of materials, and they all have kind of different concerns. But as Jana mentioned, like philosophically, we are letting them evolve too. We're not going to fix them, because the way that they live through use, it becomes part of the evidence of this collection, even though obviously our use is contained in very specific ways, being a library collection.
Awesome, fascinating. Okay, we have a few more questions. I do want to get to them all because everybody is so engaged in this, which I think is wonderful. There are some questions about the use of the decks, consultation essentially by patrons. So one of these is, it was mentioned that gloves are used for the AI capture, but wanting to clarify that patrons are not being asked to use them in the consultation of the decks. Is that accurate?
That's right. For digitization, we're trying to get our workflow really smooth. So like a deck comes in, it gets housed, Nicole can work on it, it gets digitized. Like that's sort of the flow state that we want to get to. But of course, we are not thinking to ask users to engage with them in perpetuity in gloves.
Certainly. Another question from another Conservator and Tarot user asking about the ritual aspect of consulting tarot and whether or not the cleansing processes is asked of users, or if that is something that is taken on by your staff.
I'll also welcome like Jen and Nicole and Jana even, who are all kind of have practices in this way too, to respond with their thoughts. But it's a study collection, but part of study could look like practice. And so if somebody wanted to engage with a deck and felt that like the kind of energetics of it having been used by classes and engaged with by community groups, or it's photographed by high quality digital imaging software, and it like had changed and they wanted to engage in some kind of process, as long as it didn't violate the codes of our reading room, or like bring fire in or something like that. We would, I think, be very happy to entertain a lot of different ways at it, or to help groups establish ritual practices, which is something that we have done with classes, studio art and anthropology classes, who are very interested in ritual elements and approach of these objects in that way.
Great, thank you. Let's see. We've got a question about the AI characterization. Are those in-house programs, or is this something that is more widely available now in cataloging practice?
I guess I can speak, Emily, you wanna? Okay, yeah, if this is about like the programs we use, they're currently untrained AI. So just like we use Amazon Recognition, Microsoft Azure, like Google Vision, Clarify. None of these are trained AIs, and it's kind of an experiment to see what would happen just if we fed them in and like what types of tags they would generate. Eventually, and this kind of goes back to the previous question, we would like to, like the bigger idea is that we'll like to eventually train an AI to see specific reoccurring symbols and imagery within tarot, and then sort of like pull it more into the symbolic territory and create a tool that will incorporate some of these like ritualistic, like symbolic aspects of tarot that it would go hand in hand with like the digitization and like increase access to all of these decks. But currently the ones that we show, just like gathering tags and whatnot, I can't really speak to if these are being used by other institutions. Maybe Emilie can address that a little bit more, but as is, we're just using some of these like basic untrained tools.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to wrap it up with a couple more questions. We've got one, if anybody, we have somebody who's very interested in participating in your tarot card project, how can they find out when submissions will be opened?
Conservation Lab at MIT.
Mm-hmm.
I will just hang on to that email and make sure that we get back in touch.
Perfect.
Sorry, mit.edu, if that wasn't clear.
Thanks, Jennifer. And then we've got this final question, which is just about sharing. Is it all right to share screenshots from the webinar that they might have taken on social media to bring some like further awareness to your project? We just want to make sure that that is all right.
Yeah, it would be great if anything that had a card was just showed the attribution for the artist. But I think that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, again, I really want to thank you all for your participation today. I was absolutely riveted to your presentation. I'm always intrigued personally by custom enclosures and coming up with unique solutions to unusual collections. So personally, I want to thank you for that. And really very much for the contributions that you have made to our professional field in those different open source housings that you are sharing with our wider group. So let me remind all of our attendees that you can continue the conversation online using our hashtag #ConservationTogetherAtHome. Many of our attendees, many of our presenters, et cetera, are all active on social media, so I'm sure that you'll be able to keep the ball rolling there. Very much, again, like to thank the MIT Library staff and Monicka for taking the time to prepare and share all of this with us. I also would like to let you all know that the Book and Paper Group Committee are taking a summer break from our regular webinar series. We need some rest and recharge time after this wonderful and rewarding, but a very tiring experience. But don't miss us too much, because we do have some really fun activities that we're planning to roll out later this summer, all online, of course. So on behalf of the committee, I'd like to extend a massive thank you to everyone who has made this series possible. Without the generous contributions of time and effort from our presenters and the active engagement of our attendees, it wouldn't have been nearly as successful as it has become. So thank you again very much. In the meantime, some of our other ICON specialty groups will be continuing webinars. So watch this space for more, in particular our online offerings, in order to get booking information and to find recordings of past talks. With that in mind, the next talk in our series will be tomorrow, same time, 4 p.m. British Summer Time, and it will be Sakki on a Smartphone, Shining New Light on a Florentine Renaissance Masterpiece by Paola Ricciardi, Senior Research Scientist at the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge, UK, and that is hosted by the ICON Heritage Science Group. Thank you again, everybody. We hope you have a fantastic day, and thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.